The coffee hit the floor before I could catch it. Cold shock. Body frozen, hands dripping. Hot liquid soaked through my uniform shirt, burning against my collarbone, and the whole cafeteria went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are horrified, the kind where everyone is watching and deciding, in half a second, that whatever just happened to me was probably deserved. Im Do-hyun stood over me with that smile, the one I used to think was beautiful. The one I now understood was just a mask he kept polished for an audience. "Oh, sorry, Haewon. Didn't see you there." He never did. I looked down at my hands, still shaking, still small. The kind of hands that never learned how to fight back, because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that staying quiet was the same thing as being strong. It wasn't. I know that now. But back then, crouched on the floor of Busan National University's main cafeteria with coffee burning my skin and 200 students pretending not to stare, I didn't know anything except that I needed to disappear. "Clean it up." Do-hyun said it over his shoulder like I was part of the furniture. Like the boy who used to fall asleep in his arms was now just something he'd stepped around. Yoon Chan-woo laughed from somewhere behind him, that sharp, performative laugh designed to give everyone else permission to join in. Some of them did. I grabbed napkins from the nearest table. Nobody offered to help. Park Soo-jin was in class. My scent suppressant had worn off 2 hours ago, and I could feel it, the way the room shifted when people caught even a trace of Omega on the air. Not with desire, with judgment. With that subtle, collective exhale that said, "Oh, that's why. That's why he left. That's why nobody sat with me. That's why." I pressed the napkins against my shirt and told myself I wasn't going to cry in the middle of the cafeteria. I told myself that so hard, it became a kind of prayer, holding it together by a thread. I didn't cry, but something inside me, some last soft piece I'd been protecting since Do-hyun first called me an embarrassment 6 months ago, went very, very quiet. Like it had finally decided to stop waiting for things to get better on their own. The afternoon tasted like sea salt and exhaust. Haewon moving through the city alone. I took the long way home, down through Nampodong, past the Pojangmatcha stalls just beginning to light up for the evening crowd, past the old cinema that always smelled like burnt sugar and somebody else's memories. Busan did this thing in late autumn where the wind came off the water cold enough to cut, but the city lights made everything look almost warm, almost safe. I pulled my jacket tighter and kept my head down. My phone buzzed. Once, twice. I already knew it was Do-hyun before I looked. He had a specific pattern. Ignore me publicly, then message me privately like nothing happened. Like I was supposed to be grateful he still remembered my number. "You looked pathetic today, just so you know." I stared at the message long enough that the screen timed out. Then I put my phone in my pocket and stood there on the sidewalk while a group of university students pushed past me, laughing about something I'd never be part of. 6 months ago, I would have typed back immediately, would have apologized, would have asked what I could do differently, how I could be better, what version of myself might finally be enough for him to stop looking through me like I was made of glass. Tonight, I just walked. Slow, deliberate, like someone learning to exist differently. The thing about Im Do-hyun is that he was my first everything. First alpha. First bond attempt. First person who made me feel like my Omega designation wasn't a sentence. He was pre-med, top of his cohort, came from a Busan family with enough social weight that people moved out of his way in hallways without thinking about it. And for 4 months, he chose me. Told me I was different. Told me my scent was addictive. that I made him feel calm in a way nothing else did. Then, his family found out. The memory hits. Not a flashback, just the weight of it landing in his chest. An Omega with no pack, no territory, no traceable alpha bloodline. That's what I was to them. A liability, a rumor waiting to happen. Do-hyun didn't fight it. He didn't even hesitate. He ended things in a text message and blocked me for 2 weeks. And when he came back, it wasn't to apologize. It was to make sure I understood my place. I understood now. I understood it in the cafeteria floor, in the burnt coffee on my skin, in the 200 students who watched and said nothing. I heard them before I saw them. Expensive, the kind that doesn't announce itself but commands attention anyway. 3 black vehicles. Not flashy, not loud, just immovable in the way that serious money always is, pulled up outside the Haeundae Row Tower Complex, 2 blocks from the university's East Gate. I had cut through that street 100 times. It was a shortcut, nothing more. But tonight, something made me slow down. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out, and I don't know how to explain what happened to the atmosphere when they did, except to say that it changed. The way temperature changes when a window opens. The way a room reorganizes itself around something it wasn't expecting. Triplets. Identical in structure. Same height, same sharp jaw, same dark presence that didn't ask for space but simply occupied it. But even from 20 meters away, standing half hidden behind a poljangmacha cart with my coffee-stained shirt and my broken-down dignity, I could feel the differences. The one on the left was still, controlled. His eyes swept the street in a single practiced motion and dismissed everything in it, including me. Internal. Haewon noting this, not offended, just observing. The one in the middle moved like the air belonged to him. Shoulders loose, gaze sharp. A slight curve at the corner of his mouth that could have been amusement or danger, or both. He said something to the third without looking at him. The third one looked directly at me. Not the way people usually looked at me, not with pity or dismissal, or that particular brand of Pusan University hierarchy contempt I'd gotten used to wearing like a second skin. He looked at me the way you look at something that doesn't fit. Not wrong, just unexpected. Like a word you recognize but can't quite place. I looked away first. Of course I did. I was Seo Haewon. Looking away first was basically my personality at this point. I started walking faster, pulling my jacket up around my jaw, telling myself I imagined the weight of that gaze following me down the block. Telling myself 3 men like that had absolutely no reason to register someone like me as anything more than background noise. I was probably right. I was almost certainly right. But something in his chest says otherwise. But 3 blocks later, at the convenience store on the corner of Gwangbok-ro, when I climbed up to the rooftop with a triangle kimbap I couldn't really afford and sat down to watch the Busan skyline pretend everything was fine, I could still feel it. That look. Quiet. Steady. Like being seen by someone who didn't need anything from you. Yet. I pressed one hand flat against my collarbone, right where the coffee had burned, still stinging. But underneath it, underneath the humiliation and the exhaustion and the 6 months of slowly disappearing, something else. Small. Ember quiet. Like the very first second before something decides to catch fire. Stillness. Haewon alone on the rooftop, city lights below, the night just beginning. I didn't know their names yet. I didn't know that by morning, mine would be in their mouths. The night settles. Wind shifts, carrying something unfamiliar. The kimbap was cold by the time I finished it. I sat there longer than I should have, knees pulled to my chest, watching the Busan skyline do what it always did: glitter, without caring who was looking. There was something honest about that. The city never pretended to notice you. It just kept moving, kept burning bright, kept existing completely independent of whether you were okay or not. I respected that, actually. Quiet, almost wry. Haewon finding dark comfort in indifference. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it. I already knew the rotation. Do-hyun's message, then Chanwoo's group chat, then silence, then maybe another message from Do-hyun if he felt like reminding me I existed just long enough to feel small again. I had the whole cycle memorized. That's what 6 months of this did to you. It turned cruelty into something predictable, and predictable was almost bearable. Almost. He shifts, pulls jacket tighter, looks down at his hands. The burn on my collarbone had faded to a dull throb. I pressed 2 fingers against it lightly, not enough to hurt, just enough to feel something concrete, real. Because the rest of the night had started taking on that underwater quality where everything felt slightly removed from my body, like I was watching myself from one step to the left. That happens sometimes, after bad days, after cafeteria floors and 200 people deciding I wasn't worth the effort of basic human decency. I breathed in slow. Salt air, fried food from the stall below. And underneath it, barely there, something else. Something dark and grounded, like pine resin and cold stone, that didn't belong to the neighborhood and shouldn't have reached 4 stories up. His head lifts, instinctive, involuntary. I told myself it was nothing. Scent carried strange in Busan's coastal wind. Could have come from anywhere. Could have meant nothing at all. But his body doesn't believe him. I climbed down from the rooftop at 9:30. The convenience store clerk didn't look up when I passed. I stepped out onto Gwangbok Row and turned toward the university quarter, toward the off-campus housing block where I rented the smallest room on the 3rd floor, the one with the window that faced a wall and the heating unit that worked 60% of the time. Home. The word lands flat, without warmth. I was half a block from the building entrance when I heard footsteps behind me. Not aggressive, not hurried, just present, steady, and close enough that the hairs on the back of my neck responded before my brain did. I walked faster. Not panic, just awareness. The steps kept pace. I turned the corner sharply, cutting through the narrow passage between the convenience store and the dry cleaner, the one that smelled like detergent and old concrete, the one that was poorly lit and that I normally avoided after dark. Tonight, my feet just made the decision without asking me. I pressed my back against the wall at the far end and waited. Nothing came around the corner. Silence. Then the distant sound of traffic. Then a cat knocking something off a ledge somewhere above me, and my own heartbeat, embarrassingly loud in my own ears. I stood there for a full 30 seconds feeling ridiculous. Then I stepped back out onto the main street. He was standing directly in front of me. Not blocking me, not aggressive, just there. The way certain people were just there. Like the space had reorganized around them while I wasn't paying attention. The third one. From the cars. From the Haeundae Tower. The one who had looked at me like I was a word he almost remembered. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Not because he was intimidating, though he was, objectively, the kind of person that made your instincts stand at attention, but because his expression was completely calm. No smirk, no performance, just a steady, unhurried attention that felt almost uncomfortably careful, like he was reading something in my face I hadn't meant to leave visible. Haewon's voice goes very internal, very still. His scent hit me before his voice did. pine and cold stone. Exactly what I'd caught on the rooftop. Closer now, unmistakable. Alpha. Dense and grounded and so distinctly not a threat that my omega instincts, which had been wound tight for 6 solid months, did something they hadn't done in a long time. They settled. He hates that, the involuntary trust of it. You dropped this. Quiet, unhurried, holding something out. I looked down. My student ID card. It must have slipped from my jacket pocket on the rooftop. He was holding it between 2 fingers, extended toward me, not stepping closer, giving me the choice to take it. Haewon stares at the card, then at him. I reached out slowly and took it. Our fingers didn't touch. He made sure of that, I realized. He'd angled his hand deliberately to prevent contact, like he understood without being told that I wouldn't want it. That precision scared me more than anything else about him. His voice, when it comes, is smaller than he intends. "Thank you," I said. He looked at me for one more second, just one. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked back the way he came, unhurried, like the whole thing had taken exactly the time it needed to, and not a breath more. Haewon watches him go, card pressed against his palm. I looked down at the ID, Seo Haewon, 3rd year, Omega designation, no pack listed. When I looked up, he was already gone, but the scent of pine and cold stone stayed in the narrow alley for a long time after, and my instincts, traitors that they were, stayed settled. Haewon standing alone in the alley, card in hand, the night pressing in around him. I walked the rest of the way home with my hand curled around that ID card like it was something fragile, which was ridiculous. It was plastic. It had my face on it, slightly blurred from the day I'd rushed the photo, eyes still puffy from crying the night before, because Do-hyun had told me I was too sensitive for someone who claimed to be fine. But I held it anyway. My room was exactly how I'd left it. Small desk pushed against the wall-facing window. Textbooks stacked in the order I kept telling myself I'd organize properly. A single lamp with a slightly loose bulb that flickered once when you first turned it on and then settled. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of my bed, and placed the card on the desk in front of me. Looked at it. He hadn't said his name. I hadn't asked. The whole thing lasted maybe 90 seconds, and somehow left a mark the way a full conversation shouldn't have. That bothered me. Not because something bad had happened, but because something hadn't, and I was so calibrated for bad by now that the absence of it felt like a trick. Haewon lying back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Nice things came with terms and conditions. I'd learned that the hard way. Do-hyun had been nice first, patient and soft-voiced and deliberate in the way he paid attention to me, and I had mistaken all of that for safety. I had handed him everything I had and called it love, and watched him hand it back in pieces over 4 months, until I wasn't sure which parts of myself were originally mine and which ones he'd reshaped to be more convenient. So no, I didn't trust 90 seconds of careful silence and a returned ID card. Firm, internal, trying to be firm. I just couldn't explain why my chest felt less hollow than it had 3 hours ago. He closes his eyes, exhausted, the city sounds filtering through the thin window. Sleep didn't come easy. It rarely did anymore. I lay there, listening to the muffled sounds of the building, a television 2 rooms down, someone's phone alarm going off and being silenced, the distant, low moan of a Busan foghorn somewhere over the water. My collarbone still throbbed faintly where the coffee had burned. I pressed my fingers against it in the dark, thought about the cafeteria, the sound of laughter that wasn't with me, it was at me. The particular quality of Do-hyun's voice when he performed cruelty for an audience, smooth and casual, like kindness had never lived there at all. A slow burn starting somewhere behind his sternum. And then, without meaning to, I thought about eyes that had looked at me without any of that, without judgment, without the particular Pusan University hierarchy calculation of worth that everyone seemed to run automatically whenever I entered a room. Just attention, quiet and undemanding, and somehow the most disorienting thing that had happened to me all day, which was saying something given the coffee. Almost a dark laugh, swallowed before it forms. I turned onto my side and made myself stop thinking about him, about them. Three men who existed in a completely different atmosphere than mine, who had stopped briefly in my orbit the way satellites sometimes passed close to things they had no intention of touching. It meant nothing. It meant nothing. The word count of that silence is longer than he admits. I was almost asleep when my phone lit up the room. Not Do-hyun this time. Sujin. He reaches for it, grateful for the interruption. You okay? Heard about the cafeteria. I'm going to do something terrible to Do-hyun's next coffee order. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, I'm fine. Don't waste good coffee on him. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Haewon, you don't always have to be fine. Something in his chest goes soft and painful at the same time. I put the phone face down on the mattress, not because she was wrong, because she was right, and I didn't have the energy to fall apart tonight when I'd worked so hard to hold the pieces in the right arrangement until I got home. The lamp flickered once in the dark. Settled. I finally slept. Morning arriving through sensation, not announcement. The cold woke me before the alarm did. That specific Pusan autumn cold that came through window gaps and settled on exposed skin like a quiet insistence. I lay still for a moment, taking inventory the way I'd started doing every morning, a habit I'd developed without noticing. Collarbone, still sore. Check. Chest, heavy but functional. Check. The slow dread of existing in spaces where Do-hyun also existed. Present, manageable. Mine to carry. He sits up, reaches for his suppressant, pauses. The small orange bottle on the desk was almost empty. 3 days left, maybe 4 if I was careful. Suppressants weren't cheap. My part-time hours at the campus library had been cut last month because the department lost funding, and I hadn't figured out the gap yet. I shook the bottle once. 4 days. I'd figure it out. He sets it down, starts getting dressed, methodical and quiet. I was pulling on my jacket when I noticed it, a folded piece of paper that had been slipped under my door overnight. I almost stepped over it. Then something made me stop and pick it up. No name on the outside. He unfolds it slowly. Inside, in handwriting that was clean and unhurried and somehow told you everything about the person who wrote it, were 4 words. Your scent is safe. Stillness. Complete. The jacket half on, the paper in his hands, his heart doing something it has no logical reason to do. Nothing else. No signature, no explanation, just that. He reads it again and again, and the pine and cold stone scent clinging faintly to the paper tells him everything he isn't ready to know yet. I stood there so long my arm went cold from holding the jacket half on. The paper was light, barely anything. 4 words that should not have meant what they were doing to me right now, which was cracking something open in my chest that I had spent 6 months carefully sealing shut. He folds it again, slowly, like handling something that might break. Your scent is safe. Not, you're pretty. Not, I noticed you. Not the kind of thing Do-hyun used to say, which always had a hook buried inside the softness, something to reel you in with before you realized you were already caught. This was something different, quieter, like a statement of fact rather than a move in a game. Haewon pressing the folded paper flat against his palm. I didn't know what to do with it, so I tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket, right against my chest, and told myself I was only keeping it because I might need it as evidence of something. Of what, I couldn't say yet. He finishes dressing, moves toward the door, pauses with his hand on the frame. The hallway was empty. Of course it was. Whoever had slipped it under my door was long gone, and part of me was relieved about that because the other part of me, the irrational, sleep-deprived, collarbone-burned part, wanted to open that door and find him standing there. And that want scared me more than anything Do-hyun had ever done. He steps out, closes the door, heads downstairs. The morning air outside hit sharp and clean, that particular Busan coastal cold that smelled like the sea had opinions. I pulled my jacket tighter around the note without thinking about it. Caught myself doing it, made myself stop. Walking, head down, campus direction. Sujin was waiting at the bottom of the hill near the Gwangbok-ro intersection, 2 paper cups in hand, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. She was wearing the orange beanie she'd owned since her first year, slightly stretched at the top from where she pulled it down over her ears in the cold. Warmth, immediate and real. You look like you slept for 11 minutes, flatly, handing him a cup. 9, I said. She fell into step beside me without ceremony, the way she always did, like we were continuing a conversation we'd never actually stopped having. That was the thing about Sujin. She didn't make a production out of caring about you. She just showed up, again and again. Cup of coffee and bad commentary, and a complete refusal to pretend things were fine when they weren't. Haewon holding the cup with both hands, grateful for the warmth. Chanwoo posted about yesterday, she said. Careful, watching his face. I kept walking. I know. It's got 40 comments. I know. Haewon. Sujin. I know. It's fine. She was quiet for half a block. Then, you keep saying that word like it means something. I didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer, and we both understood that. They walk, the campus gates coming into view ahead. The university in the morning had a specific energy, that low buzz of people running on caffeine and performance, backpacks and designation badges, and the invisible architecture of pack hierarchy that everyone pretended wasn't there while absolutely organizing their entire social existence around it. Omega students moved differently in these spaces. Most of us had learned to take up less room, walk quieter, check suppressant levels before leaving the dorm the way other people checked their phones. I checked mine this morning. 4 days, the weight of that sitting quietly in the background. We were passing through the east courtyard when I felt it. Not heard, not saw. Felt. That shift in atmospheric pressure that I'd noticed last night outside the tower complex. That specific rearrangement of air that happened when certain presences entered a space. Haewon's steps slow without him deciding to slow them. Sujin noticed. What? I didn't answer because I didn't have words yet. I just turned my head slightly toward the source, the way you turned toward a sound that was too low to properly hear, but too present to ignore. They were across the courtyard, all 3 of them, standing near the administration building in a cluster that somehow managed to look both completely natural and completely removed from everything around them. Kang Corporate, someone behind me whispered to someone else. The triplets, here for the board meeting with the University Foundation, apparently. Apparently, this was a thing that was happening. Haewon's internal voice going very quiet. Two of them were looking at something on a phone, heads angled together, talking in low tones. The third one was not looking at the phone. He was looking at me. Full stop. The coffee cup warm in Haewon's hands, the courtyard between them. Same steadiness as last night. Same quality of attention that didn't perform itself, didn't announce itself, just sat there being completely, uncomfortably real. In the morning light, I could see him more clearly, the slight angle of his jaw, the way he stood with his weight slightly forward, like he was always half a second away from moving toward something. He wasn't smiling, but something in his expression shifted when our eyes met, so small that anyone else would have missed it. A fractional softening around the eyes, the kind of adjustment a face makes when it recognizes something it wasn't expecting to see again so soon. Haewon's hand moves involuntarily to his jacket, to where the note sits against his chest. He noticed that too. Beat, the space between them doing something neither of them has named yet. His chin dipped. Almost nothing. Just enough. Haewon's breath catching, his instincts doing that settling thing again, the thing he absolutely does not have permission to feel. Sujin's hand closed around his arm. Haewon, why is one of the Kang triplets looking at you like that? He tears his eyes away, looks at his coffee cup, says nothing. And the note against his chest feels warmer than it has any right to. I stood there in the middle of my small room with one arm in my jacket and the paper in my hand, and absolutely no framework for what I was supposed to do with 4 words that had somehow reached into my chest and rearranged something without asking permission. Trying to think clearly. Your scent is safe. Not you are safe, not don't worry, not some broad, performative reassurance that cost nothing to say. Specifically, my scent. Which meant he had noticed it. Which meant last night in that alley, when my suppressant had been running on empty and I was basically broadcasting Omega into the autumn air like a distress signal, he had caught it, registered it, and instead of using it, instead of filing it away as information the way most alphas did instinctively, he had come back to tell me it was safe with him. The paper trembling slightly in his fingers. That was either the most disarming thing anyone had ever done for me, or the most calculated. I genuinely could not tell which one scared me more. He folds the paper carefully, tucks it into his jacket pocket, finishes dressing in silence. I told myself I was putting it in my pocket so I could throw it away later when I found a trash can. I told myself that 3 times. By the 3rd time, I had already smoothed the fold down with my thumb like it was something worth preserving, so I stopped lying to myself about that particular thing and just walked out the door. Morning. Busan. Cold and loud and indifferent. Haewon moving through it. The university campus was already alive when I got there. That specific morning energy of people who had somewhere to be and the social confidence to move through space like they belonged in it. I kept to the east corridor, the longer route that bypassed the main cafeteria, a habit I had developed over the last 3 months. Less exposure, less opportunity, less Do-hyun. He adjusts his bag strap, keeps his head down, focused. Sujin was waiting outside the lecture hall with 2 coffees, and the expression she wore when she was trying very hard not to say something she had already decided to say. Haewon almost smiles despite himself. I told you not to waste coffee, he said. This is my coffee. She held out the 2nd cup. That one is also my coffee, but I'm sharing it, which is different and morally superior. He took it. The warmth of it moved through his palms and up his arms, and he was grateful for it in a way that felt embarrassingly large for a cup of convenience store coffee. They fall into step together, easy and familiar. How bad was it actually? Sujin said. Not a question. She had a way of doing that, wrapping concern inside statements so it didn't feel like pressure. It was fine. Automatic. Haewon. Pause. He looks at his coffee. It was bad, he said. It was the regular kind of bad that I should probably be used to by now. You shouldn't have to be used to it. Quietly, with a specific kind of anger that was warm instead of sharp. That's the whole problem. He didn't answer. She was right, and they both knew it, and sometimes rightness didn't have anywhere useful to go, so you just carried it alongside everything else. They reached the lecture hall entrance, paused before going in. There's something else, Sujin said, reading him the way she always could, with an accuracy that was sometimes inconvenient. What happened after? Haewon hesitates, the paper in his pocket suddenly very present. Nothing, he said. I went home. She looked at him for exactly 2 seconds longer than necessary. Then she let it go, because she was Sujin and she understood the difference between someone who needed to be pushed and someone who needed to be given time to arrive at the thing on their own. They go inside. The lecture begins. Haewon sits and tries to pay attention. He could not pay attention. The words from the front of the room moved over him without sticking. His pen touched the page twice and produced nothing useful. His hand kept drifting to his jacket pocket, not taking the paper out, just confirming it was there. The small rectangular weight of 4 words that had no business mattering as much as they did. Internal, honest with himself in the way he rarely was out loud. The last time an alpha had paid him specific, careful attention, it had ended on a cafeteria floor with coffee burning through his shirt. He knew better than to let 4 words rewrite that lesson. He knew exactly how this worked. The softness first, then the slow erosion, then the moment where you realized the attention was never really about you at all, but about what you represented, what you could offer, what designation-shaped function you could perform. He knew. But the scent on that paper was not performance, and something in him recognized the difference even when his brain refused to. The lecture ended. He packed up slowly, letting most of the room clear before he stood. Less contact. Less chance of accidentally crossing paths with Chun-woo or anyone from Do-hyun's circle who might decide the cafeteria moment needed a follow-up. He steps into the corridor and stops. The corridor was not empty. Kang Jaesol stood near the far window, not waiting with any particular urgency, just present the way he had been in the alley. Like existing in a space was something he did without needing to justify it. He was looking out at the campus courtyard below, one hand resting loosely at his side, and he hadn't looked up yet. Haewon's body registers him before his brain catches up. That same involuntary settling, deeply irritating, completely beyond his control. He could turn around, go back through the lecture hall and take the other exit. The thought lasted approximately 4 seconds before Jaesol turned from the window and their eyes met across 12 feet of corridor and the option quietly ceased to exist. Stillness, both of them, the corridor emptying around them. Jaesol walked toward him, not fast, not slow. The same unhurried precision as the night before, like he had already calculated the exact amount of space Haewon needed and was leaving it deliberately. He stopped 2 arm lengths away. Haewon noticing this, hating how much he notices it. You read it. Not a question. His voice low and even, the kind of voice that didn't perform itself. Haewon's grip tightened on his bag strap. I don't know what you're talking about. The corner of Jaesol's mouth moved, not quite a smile, something smaller, and more honest than a smile. "Okay," he said simply. Beat. He doesn't push, doesn't argue, just accepts the deflection with a patience that feels almost unreasonable. Then he reached into his coat and held something out, a small orange pharmacy bag. Haewon's breath stops, his eyes drop to it, and the world gets very quiet very fast. Inside, visible through the thin plastic, was a suppressant refill. His exact brand, his exact dosage. His voice, when it comes, is barely above a whisper. "How did you know?" Jaesol looked at him steadily. "Because you were almost out last night, and nobody should have to be that exposed without choosing it." "Because you were almost out last night?" "And nobody should have to be that exposed without choosing it." Haewon standing completely still, the pharmacy bag between them, the corridor emptying, the world narrowing to this. I did not take it. Internal, the war happening quietly behind his eyes. Every reasonable part of me understood what was happening. An alpha I did not know had followed my scent, identified my suppressant brand, purchased a refill, and shown up outside my lecture hall to hand it to me like it was nothing. Like that was a normal thing people did. Like I was supposed to just accept it with a thank you and move forward with my morning. Every part of me that had survived the last 6 months understood exactly how that story ended. He takes a small step back, not dramatic, just enough. "I can't take that," Haewon said, carefully, keeping his voice even. "I don't know you." Jaesol didn't move forward. He didn't retract the bag either. He just held it in that same patient, extended way, like he had already anticipated this response and had no intention of making it a confrontation. "You don't have to know me," he said, quiet, unbothered. "You just have to not run out in 4 days." Haewon's jaw tightens because that number is exactly right, and he never told anyone that number. "You counted," Haewon said. The words came out flatter than he intended, stripped of the specific kind of unease underneath them. "I noticed," Jaesol said. There was a distinction in the way he said it, not surveillance, not calculation, something quieter than both of those things. The distinction does not make Haewon feel better. It makes him feel worse in a different direction entirely. He looked at the bag, looked at Jaesol. The corridor was almost empty now, the last few students filtering past without interest, and the morning light coming through the far window was that particular flat autumn quality that made everything look both too clear and too exposed. Internal, honest. He needed the suppressants. That was just the truth. Without them, he would be broadcasting his designation across every shared space on campus by the end of the week. And in a university where Do-hyun had already spent 6 months constructing a very specific narrative about what kind of Omega Seo Haewon was, that kind of exposure was not just uncomfortable. It was dangerous in the quiet, social way that left no visible marks. He reaches out and takes the bag. His fingers closed around the plastic, and he made himself look up and meet Jaesol's eyes when he did it, because accepting something with your face turned away felt like a different kind of surrender than accepting it straight on. "This doesn't mean anything," Haewon said. "I'm not agreeing to anything." "I know," Jaesol said, simply, without any of the performance of generosity that usually accompanied something like this, the expectation of gratitude, the subtle repositioning of debt. Just 2 words, and then he dropped his hand back to his side like the exchange was already complete. Haewon holding the bag, thrown entirely by the absence of conditions. "Why?" he said, not fully a question, more like a word that fell out before he could decide whether he wanted the answer. Jaesol considered it for a moment, not performing consideration, actually sitting with it, and that small difference was somehow more disarming than anything else he had done. Because I was in that street last night, he said, and I know what it looks like when someone is holding themselves together with both hands and running out of reasons to keep trying. The air goes out of Haewon completely, quietly, like a slow puncture. He wanted to say something sharp back, something that would reestablish the appropriate distance between them, something that would remind both of them that he was not a project or a responsibility or a wounded thing that needed managing. He had an entire vocabulary of deflection built specifically for moments like this. He said nothing. The silence between them is not uncomfortable, which is its own problem. Jaesol gave him one more second of that steady, unhurried attention. Then he nodded once, the same way he had in the alley, and turned to leave. "Wait," Haewon said. He hates himself slightly for saying it. Jaesol stopped, turned back halfway, unhurried. "Your brothers," Haewon said, carefully, because he had done the math last night. 3 identical men stepping out of 3 identical cars, and identical meant something specific in pack biology. "They were there too, last night. Do they know you're here?" Something shifted in Jaesol's expression, barely visible, a slight adjustment around the eyes, the kind of micro-expression that only registered if you were already watching closely, which Haewon was, because apparently that was something he did now. "Jaehan thinks I'm meeting with the property manager for the East Campus building," Jaesol said. A pause, something almost like dry humor moving through his voice. "Jaeyoon thinks I'm getting coffee." Haewon processes this, the implications of it arriving in slow order. "So they don't know," he said. "Not yet," Jaesol said. And there was something in those 2 words, a weight that suggested "yet" was doing significant work in that sentence, that this was not a permanent situation but a chosen temporary one, that Jaesol had made a deliberate decision to come here alone first, and Haewon did not entirely understand why that mattered, but his chest registered it before his brain could argue. Jaesol looking at him with that same careful steadiness. "You should eat something this morning," Jaesol said. Not a command, just an observation, the same tone he might use to note that it was cold outside. "Not just coffee." Haewon blinked, looked down at the convenience store coffee still in his hand from Soo-jin, slightly cooled now, and realized that was all he'd had since the triangle kimbap the night before. The observation is so specific and so quiet that it lands somewhere undefended. "I was going to," Haewon said. "Good," Jaesol said. Then he left. No dramatic exit, no lingering look designed to communicate anything. He simply walked back down the corridor and turned the corner and was gone. And Haewon stood there holding a pharmacy bag and a cooling coffee and the specific feeling of someone having paid attention to him in a way that had no visible hook in it, no angle, no performance, no terms and conditions buried in the fine print. He stands there for a long moment, the paper in his pocket, the bag in his hand. And that was the most frightening thing Kang Jaesol had done yet. Because Haewon knew how to survive cruelty. He had been surviving it for 6 months. He had built an entire architecture of endurance around it, learned its weight, learned its rhythms, learned exactly how much of himself to put away so there was less available to damage. He did not know how to survive this. He starts walking, slowly, toward the campus convenience store, because apparently he was going to eat something this morning. The pharmacy bag swings lightly at his side, and he does not throw it away. "Because you were almost out last night, and nobody should have to be that exposed without choosing it." Haewon, staring at the pharmacy bag, the corridor silent around them, his chest doing something complicated and unwanted. I did not take it immediately. I want to be honest about that. I stood there for what felt like an unreasonable amount of time, looking at that small orange bag like it was something that required translation. Because it did. In the language I had been living in for the past 6 months, care that arrived without a price tag attached did not exist. Everything came with a current running underneath it. Every soft thing Do-hyun had ever done for me had an invoice attached that only appeared later, when he needed something back and used the debt of his kindness to collect. Internal, measured, protecting himself the only way he knows how. So I stood there and I calculated. What does he want? What does this cost? What version of gratitude is he expecting, and how long before it becomes something I owe? Jaesol watching him, not rushing, not shifting his weight, just present. You don't have to take it, Jaesol said, quietly, reading the silence with uncomfortable accuracy. I'm not keeping score. Something in Haewon's chest cracks slightly at that, just slightly. I reached out and took the bag. My fingers brushed the plastic and I pulled it close to my side, and I looked at a point somewhere past Jaesol's left shoulder, because looking directly at him felt like standing too close to something with a lot of heat and not enough distance to be safe. Thank you, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. You didn't have to do this. I know. Simple. No performance in it. Beat. The corridor still mostly empty. A distant bell marking the next period. Why did you? I asked, and then immediately wished I hadn't, because the question sat between us like something exposed and I couldn't take it back. Jaesol looked at me for a moment. That same careful attention from the night before, like he was reading something I hadn't written on purpose. Because I wanted to, he said finally. That's the only reason. Haewon not knowing what to do with that, the simplicity of it almost more disorienting than a complicated answer would have been. I nodded once, shifted my bag, started to turn. My brothers want to meet you, Jaesol said. Haewon stops walking, turns back slowly. Your brothers? Jaehan and Jaeyoon? Even, like he's relaying information and not dropping something significant into Haewon's already overloaded morning. They saw you last night. Outside the tower. Internal, a cold clarity moving through him. So all 3 of them had noticed. Not just Jaesol. All 3, and only one of them had come back. He filed that away without knowing exactly what shelf to put it on. I don't know your brothers, I said carefully. Not yet. The corner of his mouth again, that almost smile that wasn't quite one. They'll find a way to change that. He said it without arrogance, more like a weather forecast, like he was simply describing something that was going to happen regardless of whether either of them planned it. Haewon looking at him steadily for the first time, really looking. Should I be worried about that? I asked. Jaesol considered it, genuinely considered it, which was somehow more reassuring than an immediate denial would have been. Jaehan is going to seem like a problem, he said. He isn't. He just takes longer. And the other one? Jaeyoon. A brief pause, something that might have been affection and exasperation sharing the same space. Don't let him corner you. He thinks it's charming. It isn't always. Haewon staring at him. Jaesol looking back, completely unbothered. I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't organize properly. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps following, no voice calling me back. Just the ordinary sounds of the corridor returning to itself around me. He walks, the pharmacy bag in his hand, the note in his pocket. Something shifting in the air around him that he cannot name and refuses to examine too closely yet. Sujin was exactly where he had left her, outside the campus convenience store, eating a fish-shaped pastry with the focused dedication of someone who treated snacks as a spiritual practice. She took one look at him and straightened up. "Something happened," she said. Not a question. Nothing happened. Also not convincing, he could tell by her face. "Haewon, you look like someone handed you a grenade and told you it was a gift." He almost laughed. It surprised him, the almost laugh. He hadn't expected it. He held up the pharmacy bag. Sujin's eyes went from the bag to his face to the bag again. "Where did that come from?" "Someone," he said carefully, "who apparently noticed I was running low." The silence that followed was the specific kind Sujin deployed when she was processing something at high speed and choosing her words with surgical precision. "What kind of someone?" she said slowly. "The kind I don't know how to explain yet." She looked at him for a long time. Then she held out half of her fish pastry. He took it, because Sujin's way of saying, "I'm here and I'm paying attention," had always lived in small offerings, and he had learned a long time ago to receive them. "Okay," she said. "Tell me when you're ready." He nodded. They stood together in the weak autumn sunlight, and for the first time since the cafeteria yesterday, something in his body temperature felt almost regulation. The rest of the morning passed without incident. He got through 2 lectures on the East Corridor route, took careful notes, kept his suppressant tucked in his bag like something he was guarding. The new refill sat beside the nearly empty bottle, and the contrast of them made something in his chest feel less like a held breath. Between lectures, moving through the campus corridor, Haewon staying close to the walls out of habit, he was rounding the corner toward the library when he heard it. Do-hyun's voice. Close. His body goes carefully still, the way prey animals go still. He hates that it still does this. "He's still taking suppressants." Chun-woo, somewhere around the corner, voice low and amused in that specific way that meant he was performing cruelty for an audience of at least 2. "Imagine needing to hide what you are that badly." He always needed to hide. Do-hyun, smooth, unbothered. The voice he used when he was sharpest, when the kindness mask was fully off, and what was underneath got to breathe for a moment. That's why he was so easy. Haewon's hand tightening on his bag strap, jaw setting, not moving. "Easy how?" someone else asked. "Every way." And the lightness in Do-hyun's voice was the worst part, the absolute casualness of it, like Haewon was a mild memory, like 4 months of his life was something Do-hyun filed under miscellaneous. Internal, very quiet, very controlled. I stood on my side of that corner and I breathed. In through the nose, slow, out through the mouth, slower. The kind of breathing you learned when you'd spent enough time in situations where reacting would cost you more than swallowing it. I did not go around the corner. I did not say anything. I turned and took the long route to the library, and I sat down at the farthest table from the entrance, and I opened a textbook I did not read for approximately 20 minutes. His hands, flat on the table, completely still, the stillness costing him something. What hurt was not the words. He had heard worse from Do-hyun in private. What hurt was the easy, the way it landed, the way it confirmed what he had spent 6 months trying to talk himself out of believing, that what Do-hyun had seen when he looked at him was never a person, but a function, something convenient, something that could be picked up and put down without ceremony. He pressed 2 fingers to his collarbone. The burn almost faded now, just a ghost of sensation. The library door opened. He didn't look up. He was very focused on not looking up at anything until his breathing felt less like a structural engineering problem. A chair pulled out across the table from him, unhurried. A scent hit him first, dark amber and something electric underneath, like the air before lightning. He looked up. Kang Jaesol sat across from him with both arms resting on the table and an expression that was doing at least three things simultaneously: interested, amused, and underneath both of those, something sharper and more attentive than the surface presentation suggested. Haewon, going very still, in a completely different way than he had in the corridor. "You're hard to find," Jaeyoon said. Conversational, like they had met before, like this was a continuation of something. "Jaesol said East Corridor. You weren't on the East Corridor." "I changed routes," Haewon said carefully. "Why?" Haewon deciding how much of the truth fits in this conversation with someone he does not know. "Crowd management," he said. Jaeyoon looked at him for a moment. Then he tilted his head slightly. "Im Do-hyun." Haewon's expression doesn't change. He has practiced this. The neutral face costs him nothing now. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "You do." Not unkind, just direct. The kind of directness that didn't bother dressing itself up. "He was near the library corridor 20 minutes ago. You took the back route. That's not crowd management. That's avoidance." Haewon staring at him. "You've been watching me for 20 minutes, he said flatly. "Observing," Jaeyoon corrected, and the corner of his mouth pulled into something that was genuinely, infuriatingly charming. "There's a difference." Internal. Haewon categorizing him rapidly. This one is dangerous in a specific way, not threatening, but the kind of person who got inside your perimeter before you noticed the gate was open. "What do you want?" Haewon said. Direct. He was tired of soft approaches to direct questions. Jaeyoon seemed to appreciate that. Something in his expression settled, the performance layer dropping back slightly to show something more honest underneath. "Jaesol told us about last night," he said. "Both times." "There was only one time," Haewon said carefully. "The alley," Jaeyoon said, "and the rooftop before that." The air goes out of the room slightly, Haewon recalibrating. "He was on the rooftop," he said. Not a question, the realization arriving cold and clear. Jaesol had been close enough to catch his scent from the rooftop, which meant he had been there before the alley, which meant the alley had not been coincidence. Internal. That changes the geometry of everything. He needs a moment to redraw the map. "He wasn't following you," Jaeyoon said, reading his face with the same accuracy his brother had shown. It was apparently a family trait, and it was deeply inconvenient. "We were in the building. He went out for air. He caught your scent from the street." "And came to find me," Haewon said. "He returned your ID," Jaeyoon said simply. "That's all he did." Beat, Haewon looking at him, trying to find the angle, the ulterior geometry. "Why are you here?" he said again, more quietly this time. Jaeyoon leaned forward slightly, not threatening, just closing the conversational distance. "Because Jaesol is careful and quiet, and will take approximately 3 years to say what he means," he said. "And Jaehan is going to walk in here in about 4 minutes, and he's going to look like he doesn't care about any of this, and you're going to believe him. And that would be a waste." Haewon's eyes moved involuntarily to the library door. "So I'm here," Jaeyoon continued, "to tell you before he arrives that whatever he looks like when he walks through that door is not the whole story. It's never the whole story with him." Haewon looking back at Jaeyoon, something shifting in his chest that he doesn't have a clean label for yet. "Why are you telling me this?" he said softly. Jae-yoon looked at him for a long moment. The amber and lightning scent of him was steadier now, less electric, like something that had decided to be still. "Because you've been managing people's worst behavior for long enough," he said. "That you've started expecting it as the baseline. And I'd rather you have context before Jaehan gives you reasons to add him to that list unfairly." Haewon did not need to look to know. The pressure in the room changed the way it had outside the tower the night before. Like something large and self-contained had entered the space, and the space had quietly rearranged its priorities. Kang Jaehan walked in. Haewon looked. He was the same height as his brothers, same jaw, same architecture. But where Jaesol carried stillness and Jae-yoon carried electricity, Jaehan carried something that felt like controlled weather. Like the decision had been made somewhere behind his eyes to feel nothing until he chose to, and the choosing was something he rationed carefully. His eyes found Haewon immediately. No warmth in it, no performance, just assessment, clean and direct and completely unreadable. He pulled out the chair beside Jae-yoon and sat down, did not introduce himself, did not smile, looked at Haewon with the specific expression of someone running an internal calculation they had not yet decided to share. Haewon looked back, because he was tired of looking away first, because something small and new in him had decided that this morning, at least, he was not going to be the one who flinched. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Jae-yoon watching both of them with poorly concealed interest. "You're not what I expected," Jaehan said finally. His voice was low and even, and carried the particular quality of someone who did not waste words on things they didn't mean. Haewon held his gaze. "I get that a lot." Something moved behind Jaehan's eyes, too fast to name, there and then carefully filed away. "That's not a compliment," Jaehan said. "I know," Haewon said. "I didn't take it as one." The library quiet around them. Jae-yoon no longer bothering to hide his expression, which had moved fully into something that looked like satisfaction. Jaehan studied him for another moment. Then he looked at Jae-yoon. "He'll do," he said simply. Jae-yoon's smile broke fully open for the first time. It was an unreasonable thing to witness, warm and sharp at the same time, like something that could cut you and make you grateful for it. Haewon looked between them. "Do for what?" he said carefully. Neither of them answered immediately, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something that hadn't been named yet, something that pressed against the edges of the ordinary library afternoon like it was waiting for permission to become real. Haewon sitting very still, the pharmacy bag in his bag, the note in his pocket, 3 alphas arranged around him like points of a geometry he hadn't consented to and couldn't quite bring himself to walk away from. His collarbone where the coffee burned, almost healed now. And underneath the amber and the pine and the cold steel scent of 3 men who had no logical reason to be sitting in a university library looking at him like he was something worth the trouble. Something in Seo Haewon very quietly stopped apologizing for taking up space. The library, the 3 of them around him, the afternoon light coming through the high windows in long, pale strips. "Do for what?" I said again. Not because I hadn't heard the silence the first time, but because I had learned, slowly and at significant personal cost, that letting powerful people leave their intentions unnamed was how you ended up owing debts you never agreed to carry. Jaehan looked at me, something shifting in his expression, not softening exactly, more like adjusting, the way a lens adjusts to bring something into sharper focus. Our father's annual stakeholder dinner is in 3 weeks, Jaehan said. Even, measured, like he was reading from an internal document. Every significant PAC affiliate in the Busan metropolitan region attends. It is, among other things, a display. A display of what? I said carefully. Stability, Jaeyoon said, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, watching me with that layered attention of his. PAC cohesion. The suggestion that the Kang line is not 3 unmarked alphas in their late 20s who have been refusing every arranged match their father has proposed for 4 years. I looked between them. You want me to attend a dinner, I said slowly. We want you to consider it, Jaesol said. I turned, and he was there, in the chair to my left, the one I hadn't seen him take because he moved like weather, present before you registered the change. His pine and cold stone scent wrapped around the edges of the amber and steel already in the air, and for one traitorous second, my entire nervous system exhaled, like it had been waiting for that specific combination without knowing it. I pressed my hand flat against the table, grounding myself. Consider it, I repeated. You'd be introduced as a guest, Jaehan said. Nothing formal, no designation announcement, no PAC claim, just presence. Just presence, I said, quietly, turning the words over. At a Kang family stakeholder dinner, with 3 alpha billionaires. When you say it like that, Jaeyoon said, it sounds complicated. It is complicated, I said. I'm a third-year Omega with no PAC, a coffee stain on my good shirt, and an ex-boyfriend who announces my failures to crowds for entertainment. What exactly do you think my presence communicates at a dinner like that? Silence. The 3 of them holding it differently. Jaeyoon with something that looked like restrained amusement, Jaesol with that steady attention that gave nothing away, Jaehan with the focused stillness of someone who had just heard something they were reprocessing. That we chose you, Jaehan said finally. Flat, simple, carrying more weight than its 4 words suggested. Something moved through my chest. I didn't reach for it. I let it pass. You don't know me, I said. We know enough, Jaesol said quietly. You know I was almost out of suppressants, and I eat triangle kimbap alone on rooftops, I said. That's not enough to build a decision on. It told us what we needed to know, Jaeyoon said, and his voice had dropped the performance layer entirely. What was underneath was direct and honest, and more serious than his face usually suggested he was capable of. Someone who eats alone on a rooftop after being publicly humiliated and still goes home without breaking anything or burning anything down has more internal structure than most people we've met in boardrooms. I stared at him. He held the look without flinching. I pulled my bag onto my lap and looked at the table for a moment. The grain of the library wood, a small scratch near my left hand that someone had made probably years ago and nobody had bothered to sand down. Small, permanent mark, unannounced, still there. Internal, honest with himself in the basement level where he kept the things he didn't say out loud. Part of me wanted to say yes, not because of the dinner, not because of the Kang name or the tower in Haeundae, or the particular way all 3 of them arranged themselves around me like I was something worth the geometry. But because I was tired, genuinely, bone-deeply tired of being the person who made himself smaller to make other people more comfortable. And something about the way these 3 sat at this table, not asking me to shrink, not performing patience as a manipulation, just waiting, actual waiting, made that tiredness feel suddenly very heavy and very visible. I looked up. I need time, I said. You have it, Jaesol said immediately. I'm not agreeing to anything, I said. I'm saying I'll think about it. That's all we're asking, Jaehan said, And then, after a pause that felt like it cost him something small but real, for now. Jaeyoon smiled, and this time it was smaller and warmer than the ones he'd been deploying, the kind that lived closer to genuine progress. I stood, bag over my shoulder, the pharmacy refill inside it, the note still in my jacket pocket. I looked at all three of them once. Jaesol, steady, Jaeyoon, bright, Jaehan, unreadable, but watching with something underneath the surface that pulled at me in a way I didn't have clean language for yet. "Don't follow me out," I said. "We won't," Jaesol said. I believed him. That was the part that stayed with me all the way down the library steps and out into the cold Busan afternoon. The wind off the water, the city noise rising around him. Haewon walking with his head up for the first time in longer than he could remember. I believed him. He rounds the corner toward the east gate and stops. Im Do-hyun was leaning against the wall outside the east gate with Chanu beside him and two other people from their circle arranged behind them like furniture. He had a coffee in one hand and that expression on his face, the one he only wore when he had decided something was about to be fun for him specifically. Cold settling in Haewon's stomach. Not fear exactly, the specific exhaustion of a recurring problem. "Haewon," Do-hyun said. Warm, friendly, poison wearing a good coat. "Heard you've been making friends." I didn't stop walking. "Interesting friends," Chanwoo said, pushing off the wall slightly. "The Kang brothers, is it? That's ambitious." I kept walking, the gate 10 meters away. "They're going to get bored," Do-hyun said, conversational, like he was sharing helpful information. "That's what they do. Pick something up, look at it, put it down. You know how alphas like that are." 5 meters. "You're not their type, Haewon. You were barely mine." I stopped. Not because it landed the way he wanted it to, but because something in me that had been staying quiet for 6 months made a different decision. I turned around slowly. Do-hyun looked satisfied. He always looked satisfied when he thought he'd found the bruise. "You know what I used to do," I said, calm, almost conversational, the steadiness in my voice surprising even me. "After you said things like that? I used to go home and try to figure out what I'd done wrong, what I could fix. What version of myself might finally make you treat me like I was worth basic decency?" Do-hyun's expression shifted slightly. He hadn't expected actual words. He'd expected flinching. "I wasted a lot of time on that," I said. "I want it back. I'm not getting it back, but I'm done spending more of it standing still while you practice being cruel in front of an audience." I turned back toward the gate. "You'll go back to being nothing," Do-hyun said, sharper now, the warmth gone. "The moment they lose interest, you'll have nobody." I pushed through the gate without answering, and the thing was, the terrible, clarifying thing was, he might be right, and I was walking away anyway, because some dignities cost everything and are still worth it. Haewon on the street outside campus, the sea wind hitting him full in the face, cold and clean and indifferent. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my jacket pockets and kept walking and let them shake, because shaking was honest, and I was done performing steadiness I didn't have. The note crinkled under my left hand. 4 words. The pharmacy bag pressed against my right side through the fabric of my bag. He walked until the shaking stopped, the city moving around him, Busan loud and salt-soaked and alive. By the time it stopped, he was at the water, the Nampodong waterfront, the old part, where the fishing boats still came in and the Poljangmacha carts lined up along the concrete barrier, and the sea looked like hammered pewter in the late afternoon light. He sat on the barrier with his feet hanging over the edge and looked at the water for a long time, the scent of salt and cold stone and his own exhale. He took out his phone, opened Soo-jin's messages, typed, "I said something to Do-hyun today." 3 dots immediately. "What? What did you say? Are you okay? Where are you?" The almost laugh again, more complete this time, actual warmth in it. He typed the waterfront address. She arrived 12 minutes later with 2 cans of sikye from the nearest convenience store, slightly out of breath, scarf half unwound, and the expression of someone who had speed-walked with great emotional purpose. She sat beside him on the barrier, handed him a can, opened hers. They sat together looking at the water, the city behind them, the sea in front. "Tell me," she said. He told her, all of it. The library, the 3 brothers, the dinner proposal, Do-hyun at the gate, what he had said, the shaking hands, walking here. Soo-jin listened without interrupting, which was one of the things he loved most about her, the way she held space without filling it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The third one," she said. "Jaesol. He left a note under your door." "Yes." "And bought your suppressants." "Yes." "And the one in the middle watched you for 20 minutes in the library and then told you his brother wasn't as cold as he looks." "Yes." Soo-jin looking at the water. "Haewon," she said carefully. "I think you might be in the middle of something significant." "I think so too," he said. "I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to know yet," she said. Simply, warmly, with the particular Soo-jin's certainty that felt like solid ground. "You just said something true to someone who needed to hear it and walked away with your spine intact. That's enough for today." He looked at the water, the sikye cold in his hand, the city breathing behind him. "He said I'd have nobody," Haewon said quietly, "when they lose interest." "He said that because it's the only thing he has left," Soo-jin said. "When someone can't control you anymore, they try to make you afraid of what comes after. Don't let him write that story." Long pause, the foghorn somewhere over the water. "What if he's right?" Haewon said. Not with fear, just honestly. Just looking at the possibility the way you looked at difficult things when you'd stopped flinching and started actually seeing them. Soo-jin turned to look at him. "Then you'll still be the person who stopped shrinking," she said. "And that's more than you had yesterday." Haewon sat with that for a while. The water moved, the light shifted. Busan went on being Busan. 3 days later, he sent a message to a number Jaesol had left written on the back of the pharmacy bag in the same clean, unhurried handwriting as the note. "I'll come to the dinner, just as a guest, nothing formal." The response came in under a minute. "Understood. Thank you, Haewon." He read it twice, his name in that sentence, not the omega, not you, not the designation shorthand that reduced him to a category, just his name, clean and specific and treated like it belonged to someone worth addressing directly. He put the phone down, looked at the wall-facing window of his small room, the city sounds filtering through. Something was beginning. He didn't know its shape yet. He didn't know its cost or its destination, or whether the 3 men who had walked into his orbit like weather patterns had intentions that would hold under pressure. He didn't know if he was walking toward something real or toward another beautiful thing that would show him its invoice later. But he was walking forward, and that, after 6 months of standing very still in the middle of other people's cruelty and calling it survival, felt like the most radical thing he had ever done. Epilogue. Some weeks later. The Haeundae coastline, evening. The dinner had been exactly as complicated as he had expected and nothing like what he had feared. He had worn the one good blazer he owned, and Sujin had fixed his hair and told him he looked like someone people would remember. And he had walked into the Kang family's event space on the 32nd floor of the Haeundae Tower with his suppressant at full strength and his name sitting quietly inside him like something he had recently decided to stop apologizing for. Jaehan had met him at the elevator. No warmth in his expression, but he had offered his arm in the formal pack escort gesture and said, quietly, looking ahead, "You don't have to perform anything tonight. Just be exactly what you are." It was the most Jaehan had ever said to him in one sentence. It was enough. Jaeyoon had found him 40 minutes into the dinner, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses and a commentary on every person in the room that was so precisely observed and genuinely funny that Haewon had to press his mouth closed twice to keep from laughing in the middle of a conversation about regional pack legislation. Jaesol had simply stayed close, not hovering, not performing protectiveness, just present, the way he always was, like a fixed point Haewon could locate without looking. And Im Do-hyun had been there, across the room, because his father had a minor affiliate relationship with the Kang business network, and Haewon had watched him register the 3 brothers arranged around a small omega with no pack listing and no territorial claim, and the particular expression of someone whose internal map had just been redrawn without his permission. Do-hyun had not approached him once, not from respect. Haewon was clear-eyed enough to know that, but from the specific calculation of someone who understood that the geometry of power had shifted and direct engagement was no longer advantageous. He had not felt victorious about that. He had felt something quieter and more durable than victory. Now, weeks after the dinner, the Haeundae waterfront at evening, Haewon standing at the railing with the sea in front of him and the sea behind him. Jaesol stood beside him, close enough that the pine and cold stone scent of him was steady and present, and warm in the way that things that had become familiar became warm without announcing it. They had been standing there for 10 minutes without talking. Haewon had stopped finding silence uncomfortable around him approximately 2 weeks ago. "You're different," Jaesol said finally. "From what?" Haewon said. "From the rooftop," Jaesol said. "The night with the kimbap." Haewon looked at the water, something moving in his chest, slow and certain. "I'm the same," he said. "I'm just standing differently." Jaesol turned to look at him, that careful attention, the one that read without taking. "Yes," he said simply, like that was the exact right answer and he had been waiting to hear it without knowing he was waiting. The sea moved. The lights of Busan came up behind them, amber and white and the particular gold of a city that never really went dark. Haewon looked at him, really looked, the way he had started letting himself do, without the flinching, without the automatic calculation of what attention cost. "I'm still figuring out what this is," he said quietly. "All 3 of them. This strange new geometry of his life that had no name yet and no map." "So are we," Jaesol said. Honest, unhurried, not asking for more than what existed right now. Haewon nodded slowly. He turned back to the water, pressed his hand flat against the railing, cold metal under his palm, solid and real. Behind him, the city, Busan, loud and salt-soaked and indifferent and alive. The cafeteria floor and the coffee burn and the 200 people who had decided he wasn't worth the effort. The rooftop kimbap and the note under the door and the pharmacy bag and the library table and a waterfront conversation with Sujin that had handed him something he hadn't known he'd lost. In front of him, the sea, moving and enormous and completely unbothered by what it contained. And beside him, pine and cold stone, and a silence that had never once asked him to be smaller. He breathed in, slow, the salt air filling his lungs, clean and cold and real. Seo Haewon did not have a pack. He did not have a claim or a territory or a designation that anyone in the Pusan University hierarchy had ever treated as something worth protecting. What he had was this: the railing under his hand, the city behind him, the sea in front. A friend who brought sikhe and asked nothing of him that he wasn't ready to give. And 3 men who had found him on a rooftop, and in an alley, and in a library, and at a dinner, and had not once, not a single time, asked him to be easier to hold. The ember he had felt on the rooftop that first night, small and quiet, the one that had felt like the first second before something decided to catch fire. It was burning now. Not loudly, not with the performance of transformation or the dramatic announcement of becoming. Just steadily. The way things burned when they had finally found enough air. He stayed at the railing until the last light left the water, Jaesol beside him, the city coming alive behind them, and Seo Haewon, who had once made himself as small and quiet and forgettable as possible, took up exactly the space he had always deserved, and did not apologize for a single inch of it. To everyone listening, here is what this story was really about. Not the dinners or the towers or the 3 alphas who slowly rearranged themselves around one quiet omega like he was worth the geometry. Those things were real in the story, but they were never the point. The point was the rooftop. The point was a person who had been told in 100 different ways that he was too small and too much and not enough, and somehow both simultaneously. Sitting alone with cold kimbap and deciding, without fanfare, to feel the city instead of disappearing into it. The hardest thing is not surviving the people who diminish you. The hardest thing is surviving them, and then choosing, on the other side of that, to stop using their measurements. Haewon didn't become powerful because 3 wealthy alphas chose him. He became powerful the moment he turned around at that gate and said the true thing out loud, knowing it might cost him everything and walking away anyway. That moment belongs to him alone. If someone in your life has been using your softness as a target, your vulnerability as entertainment, your need for connection as a leash, this story is for you. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not easy or forgettable or beneath protecting. You are someone worth the geometry. Stand differently. The rest will follow.